Susan Davis is our guest this week. She's the chairwoman of Susan Davis International, a global communications firm headquartered in Washington, D.C. Throughout 4 decades, she has personally represented leaders of more than a dozen countries on issues ranging from economic crisis to nation building and trade expansion. She has provided public relations counsel to the Vatican for the Papal Visit to Ireland and counseled members of Congress, non-governmental organizations, multinational C-suite executives, and senior leaders of U.S. government agencies. Susan is a founding board member of the National Women's Forum and the first international president of International Women's Forum. A lifelong advocate for democracy building and leadership development for women, Susan is board chair emeritus of Vital Voices Global Partnership, the preeminent NGO empowering emerging women leaders in 125 countries. Susan Davis, welcome to Next Steps Forward.
Thank you, Chris. It's lovely to be here. You have such wonderful and interesting guests that I'm honored that you asked me to join you.
No, we're honored to have you. I know how busy you are, so thank you very much for your time. Susan, you're involved in so many other important causes that I take up another 10 minutes just to share them with the introduction. But I promise we'll get to some of them during the course of our conversation. But first, let's start with what journalists call an edge of the news topic and what's going on in Israel and the Gaza Strip. You have very personal connections with that region because you've mentored women there and have longstanding friendships. How did you get connected to them, and what are you hearing, if anything, from them right now?
Well, first of all, Chris, I actually was part of a small group of women after the Camp David Accords, where, peace was agreed upon between Israel and Egypt. I was with a small group of women. We went into Israel and we brought the first Israeli women from Israel into Egypt. And we turned around and brought the first Egyptian women into Israel. It was an extraordinary experience. And so, of course, I have wonderful relationships since that time, many decades ago now. And then through my involvement with Vital Voices Global Partnership, I met many women from Palestine, women who live in Gaza, women from Israel, etc., who I've kept in close contact with all this time and still to this very day.
And being so deeply involved in these regions of conflict, do you stay glued to the television news sources 24/7, or do you have to limit and sort of ration your news intake?
Oh, I think I'm like most everybody. When it first happens, I jumped right in and I couldn't stop watching, listening, reading, etc. But after about 48 hours of this, and the same was true when Russia invaded Ukraine, it's just overload, sensory overload. You can't really take it. And you don't want to see all of the horrible photos and hear the sad, sad stories. So it's one of those things where now I try to get my news I get it from the internet more than anywhere else right now. I allow myself 30 minutes sometime during the day to catch up on what's happening in Israel and Gaza, but it's tough. It's tough. Everybody, I'm sure, feels that way.
No, absolutely. And maybe as a follow-up to that, what do you do or can you do to cope with the worries that you have for your friends in those regions?
I would just reach out and talk to them. The minute within just a few minutes of learning what had happened on October 7th, I immediately reached out to a woman that I've been mentoring for years in Israel to find out how she was, whether she was safe, what was happening with her family. And of course, sadly, her son had just been recalled and he was on his way to the front where he is now, as a matter of fact. And she was devastated with what had happened and also what was going to happen. So, in those situations, and same is true with what's happened in Ukraine or in any other part of the world, the most important thing you can do is just listen to people and just, be as empathetic as you possibly can be. And if they need things, you try to provide them for them. I remember when Russia invaded Ukraine, the first request I got, and probably a lot of people got this who had friends there, was for drones. Could you help us get drones, right? So it's small things that you can do for people because, in the immediacy of the crisis, there's not very much you can do. The best thing you can do is be there for them.
Our conversations and next steps forward focus on well-being, resiliency, and leadership through adversity. In your experience, what gives people, and especially women, the strength, the resilience to find their way through a conflict such as we've seen in Ukraine and we're seeing now in Gaza and Israel?
Oh, so women have always been the pillar of strength for conflicts, from the beginning of time. So there's nothing new. I think women, first of all, women don't think of themselves first. Of course, they think about their children, their family, and their community. So that is a normal way for women to be, and women are used to dealing with crisis in their family, on a regular basis. So, there's a built-in resilience that women have, and it just sort of comes to the fore in a really serious crisis situation. So, the bend but not break kind of mantra is sort of what you see, and what I certainly have experienced all over the world as I see women. It doesn't matter what country they're in. It doesn't matter what the crisis is. They just seem to be able to rise above it, at least in the moment. Doesn't mean that people don't break at some point along the line, but in the crisis and at the time when it counts the most, women just make it happen.
In your opinion, what's going to happen to the women and girls in Ukraine and the Gaza Strip, God willing, these conflicts end?
Yeah. Oh, the same thing that happens after conflict everywhere. There needs to be peace, but there at the same time, I mean, and actually what people are undergoing right now is just tremendous gender-based violence. And, there's such a huge need for of humanitarian assistance, et cetera. But what you see, and the best example I can give you of this, although there are great examples in Africa as well, is in Northern Ireland, where without the women's coalition, there would never be a Good Friday agreement. The women actually came in and brought the men together, brought the parties together, and helped forge that peace agreement. And it's the same, hopefully, will be true in these other countries where women will be part of the peace process, because in places where they are, there's much lasting peace. And I'm hopeful that will be the case. And then I think women's role also needs to be in reconciliation and dialogue, especially, and hopefully, again, it's the Palestinian-Israeli situation is the perfect example of it. And there was so much of that, Chris, that was going on. There was so much going on, of especially women forging great relationships across their cultures and working together on girls' education and working together on community issues and working together on healthcare issues, et cetera. And, and now they're just torn apart by what's happened.
What region most concerns you as the most likely one to expand into a greater conflict? Is it Ukraine, Israel, Gaza, China and Taiwan, somewhere else?
Well, I certainly didn't expect, I don't think most people expected what would happen, in Israel on October 7th. So, I mean, I think this one has the bigger chance of growing and becoming far worse than what it is now. That's even possible from what you see every day. So yeah, I would say this one now, but I'm no, um, I can't prophesize, that's for sure. But this one has just so many extra possibilities, terrorists and so many other countries who would love to get into the mix, as we all know. So I would say that this is probably and hopefully it can be stopped before it turns into something much worse.
Great. We were talking about your work as a mentor. What inspired you to become a mentor for other women?
I think that was just inbred. I mean, I was mentored as a young person from the beginning, I think, and I just benefited so much from other wiser people helping me along my way. So it wasn't a choice that I made that was like, oh, I'm going to be a mentor now. It just happened. It's like pay it forward, right? And I learned that in my family. I learned that in my community, and so it just something I do.
Natural leaders just naturally step up.
I think most people just naturally step up. I think they do. They
We
might
need
not
more.
they might not all be recognized for it, but I think most people do.
As I look at these conflicts, I can't help but think about what's going on here in the United States. Americans aren't being subjected to a military conflict, but so many are feeling the stress of soaring costs. They're breaking the household budgets. They're worried about losing their jobs. They're at odds with each other over political differences. How should we view our stresses compared to those of other people around the world? Is it a case of kind of lucky stars and quit complaining, or do we have real cause to worry and feel sorry for ourselves?
Oh, I'm not a proponent of feeling sorry for yourself, so that's not a good question to ask me because I'd say get over it, move on. Um, you know, the I'm one of those the glass is always half full, and I really not only feel sorry for people who see the world as the glass is half empty or even less than that, but if I get a chance to try to change their mind, I'm going to do that. So I think I mean if you just take a look, just take one day of looking at what's going on in Gaza and Israel and say we're worse off, I don't think so. We're living in a country where we have freedom, and we're living in a country where we're secure, maybe not 100%, but certainly more so than they are. And we know where our food is coming from and our water. I mean, I just think we're lucky. I think we're lucky.
Couldn't agree with you more. You've also worked with women in our military. Is there a particular group of women or traits of women who are most resilient? And if so, what makes them that way?
I think I just go back to what I said before about resiliency. I think women are just naturally resilient because they have to be in terms of their role in the world and their gender. I'm so very impressed at the resiliency of the military women that I've had the privilege of meeting and getting to know over the years, though, because they've had to fight so hard to be able to be in a position to defend their country. I mean, to me, that just sounds so wrong. As it's coming out of my mouth, I'm thinking, like, what is wrong with that picture? But that's the way it was and is still, unfortunately, although it's so much better today than it was. But, I mean, women have been serving in this country since the Revolutionary War. They were their husbands went down and they put on their clothes and they picked up the musket and off they went. So we should be grateful for the tremendous contributions that women have made in the military and are continuing to make now. But it's been a hard and long road for them, and the history is absolutely amazing, and their resilience, to just fight against the odds, but have that mission. And I think that's really where it is in terms of resilience too. Is if you're focused on a mission, where you're going. You're just going to put up with anything in order to get there.
You're going from A to B and you'll get there wherever you have to.
Right. That's exactly right.
Looking at your career, Susan, you're drawn to regions of conflict. Why do you think that is? And what have you learned about the world and about yourself from those experiences?
Well, that's a really good question, Chris. I don't know that I'm so drawn to regions of conflict as much as I seem to be a magnet for women who are in the regions of conflict. But if you have any amount of empathy, once you see how tough life is for someone, and it might not necessarily be war, but it could be serious gender-based violence, or it could be lack of education for girls, or what I'm drawn to is trying to help women get to the position they should be in their life, in their community, in the world, and I've always been drawn to that. And I will be, for the rest of my life, because there's so much work to be done. But in the process of me trying to do what little I can do for them, oh my gosh, what I have learned from so many incredible women, and seeing, not just resilience, but courage and fearlessness, even if they had the fear inside, just fearlessness to get to where they wanted to go, despite the odds. And the person that just immediately jumps to mind is Kenya Nataya, who is from Kenya, Maasai tribe. She in her community, women had to undergo female circumcision, in age 12, 13. And she told her father she wouldn't do that, and she would run away and bring, um, ruin the reputation of the family, unless he allowed her to finish her education. And if he did, she would undergo the FGM. So she did, and her father kept his word, and her village put together the money and sent her to school. She went to Randolph-Macon School here in Virginia, and she got her master's degree, her PhD. She built a school back in her time. I mean, just amazing. But what she gave up in order, and at that young age, she knew, that she wanted to be educated and she wanted to help educate other girls. It's pretty amazing.
There's another story you have, an experience with an Afghan woman in, of all places, Santa Fe, New Mexico. What happened there and where did it lead?
Oh, yes. Um, to be quite honest, it didn't occur to me that I would be involved in Afghanistan. And this is way before, way before the Taliban came in this last time. But I was in Santa Fe, New Mexico to give a few speeches. And I was staying at a friend's home. And there was this Afghan woman who was also staying at the home. And one night I came back and I saw her packing up crayons and spices and other kinds of things. And I just started a conversation with her, and discovered that she had just started a school in Afghanistan on the site of of what was the king's favorite boys' school that had just gone into complete disrepair. And I asked her, how she started the school, and she had the most amazing story. She had come from Afghanistan, gone to school in Massachusetts, had a scholarship to Oxford. Personal things happened in her family, and she couldn't continue that. Went back to Massachusetts, and she was alone, and she had a young boy, so she couldn't keep up her education, her PhD education. So she started a little sewing business, and she became the first woman president of the Rotary, which is important in the story of her local Rotary. 9/11 happened, and she was, of course, the only Muslim in her community. She was petrified. She was horrified at what Muslims had done. She was petrified about herself and her son and not knowing how the community would respond. But the community responded with love and really wrapped their arms around her. And in exchange, she started making masks and gloves for people who were at ground zero. And ultimately, she made a carpet which hangs in the 9/11 museum. And through all of this, she ended up meeting some army guys who, after we went into Afghanistan, said, you should go back and see how terrible it became for girls in Afghanistan. So she did, with their protection, and discovered the dire need for girls' education. And that's how she started the school. So I said to her, well, how could I help you? And, she said, well, the girls don't get fed because I don't have money for that. So I said, oh, I'll help you with that. So that was what I thought I was going to do. And, within about 3 months, I became the chairman of her board. So that was a very long time ago, I think about 12 years now. But it's just been a wonderful experience. And of course, we had over 1,000 girls in our school the day the Taliban took over. And then they made all the schools close in the country. Then they reopened them. And on the day all the girls came back, within an hour of us opening the school, the Taliban issued an edict that any girl over the age of 12 had to go home and she could no longer be educated. So we had then half of the school, 500 girls in our school, and which was just devastating for the older girls. But we decided to open up the kindergarten just to see what would happen. And 200 families showed up with girls who wanted to still have their girls be educated, even though they could only go to 12th grade. So we're over 760 girls in our school again. So it's great.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it is.
Congratulations. That's fantastic.
It is.
So things changed very quickly in Afghanistan after President Biden abruptly ended the U.S. presence in that country. What has happened to women in that country since the Taliban assumed control, and what future do you see for those girls?
Well, in my glass is half full mode, I would say someday those girls that we're educating up to the age of 12 are going to be able to continue their education. I don't know what will happen, to the girls today, but I mean, it's really to the older girls today. Um, it's a very sad situation. I mean, everyone knows what it is. Girls over the age of 12, women have no rights. And I don't know that it's going to change in the short run. We keep hoping every day that it will, but right now it doesn't look good. But we have to keep trying. So we're going to keep educating those girls. We're going to keep doing it until we either are stopped or things change.
Can you share a few of your most memorable experiences from your mentoring?
Oh my goodness, we'd have to do two podcasts or three.
I'm available.
Chris. Um, Let me share, a lot of mentoring is really personal to the person, so I feel less comfortable, telling everybody's stories. But I'll tell you some of the amazing women that I've worked with, gotten to know, who have so enriched my life. One was Dr. Hawa Abdi, who was the first woman gynecologist in Somalia, and she started health clinics and all. And then when the militants took over, she ended up with building a refugee camp that ultimately had 90,000 people in it. And then the militants came into the camp and held her hostage and held the nurses hostage, etc. And she not only talked them down, but she demanded an apology, and she got it. You know, amazing woman. And then I told you about Kenya. There's another fabulous woman, um, Hafsa Abda from Nigeria. Her dad was president, and he was murdered. He was assassinated. And she took up the reins and still does, and is trying to do her best to, bring democracy and all the good parts of democracy to Nigeria. And, there are just fabulous women doing work that are, especially in India, who are trying to work with gender-based violence, which is a really huge problem there, as it is all over the world. And one, Elsa de Silva, has built this incredible digital network and a way for women to be connected to one another and to homes, so that if anybody follows them or tries to hurt them in any way, they can just connect with each other, and police are on it, et cetera. So, I mean, I could go on and on about all of these women, but I mean, they're just truly um, they're people that you just have to admire, and you feel like, could I do this? Could I do that? I don't know. I really don't know if I could, but I can listen to them and connect the dots sometimes, which is very helpful to them.
No, absolutely. Susan, we've been talking about so many current events and the state of the world today. I know the title of the show is Next Steps Forward, but let's take a step back. Where were you raised, and how did you become interested in international affairs?
So I was raised in a small town in northern Wisconsin, and a town that was not exactly diverse. There were no people of color. There were no people of other cultures at all, except that I grew up in a time where your heritage was very important to you. So if you were German or Polish or Irish or Swedish or whatever, your family sort of instilled in you, that culture, that heritage. So you learn the songs, and you learn, the about the food and the history and all that sort of thing. So that was, I mean, very much just sort of natural as I grew up. Then I went to the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and then my life completely changed, because there were many people of color, many people of other cultures. My uncle, my actually, my cousin was the head of engineering foreign programs. So he had students at his home every single weekend, and I was there for free food. So I got to meet lots and lots of people, and learned about cultures and life and all, in ways that I probably never would have. So I just sort of grew into it.
So college was your first exposure
It
to,
was.
got it.
Mhm.
And then what was your first trip you took outside the United States and what effect did it have on you?
Oh, well, I'll tell you two, actually, in different parts of the world. So, of course, the first trip I had was to Ireland. And, that was the beginning of many, many, many journeys there and, basically feeling like it's my second home. The other trip might surprise you. I was in my early 20s and I had got an opportunity to go to China with a White House delegation. And it was an amazing experience. It was at a time when China hadn't yet really opened up. They had all these friendship stores all over. You had, a million minders, et cetera. We were told by the State Department that we couldn't talk about religion, politics, or sex at all. And we had to be very careful about what we said. And of course, the first thing that happened when we got on the bus was each one of us had a minder, and those are the three things they wanted to talk about, right? So it was just a real eye opener, but it was still not, the society is not open, but it was definitely not open then. But we were very much minded. We were taken to all kinds of places that they wanted us to see. I saw more children performing than probably any other time in my life. But it was still an incredible experience. And one of the things that I remember was that we had but there were traffic jams, but the traffic jams were these Mercedes bicycles and goats, all on the same road. So you can tell that it was quite a long time ago, but it was an amazing experience. And it just, from that, I've just had all kinds of opportunities for different things that I got involved with. Because I lived in Washington, D.C., I think I really had a chance to do so much more than I might have if I had lived in another part of the country, because I got a chance to work with international organizations. I got a chance to be on boards of directors at a young age of democracy initiatives and international outreach organizations. So it really was both gradual, but sort of a natural progression.
I'm laughing at the traffic jam you mentioned. For my wife on our honeymoon, for part of it, we went to Egypt and Cairo, and it was the exact same traffic jam. It was donkeys and cows and cars, and it was pretty funny. So I can visualize that very clearly. And was that trip to China when you first started to travel extensively internationally?
It was, and then the trip that I mentioned where we took the first woman from Israel and Egypt into the other countries was another really big, memorable trip. But I think, yes, I've been probably 4 decades of traveling internationally on a regular basis,
And
and
that
and
might,
more, and the majority of it not for fun. And by that I don't mean that I didn't have fun, but it was a purposeful trip, and then I got to experience all the fun associated with that.
and if you can, how many countries have you visited over the years?
Oh my gosh, Chris, I have no idea. I'll have to count those up. I mean, it's quite a few,
Look at
but
the stamps in your passport.
right. But I've lost my passport a couple of times, so I don't know. That's I have to. I really have to think about it. It's many. I won't venture a guess, but there's just so many more left. So,
And if you want to, is there a favorite country or region you'd like to share?
oh, of course, it's Ireland.
I didn't have to ask that one, right?
Of course it is. Yes, I made 4 trips in the last 8 weeks. So.
All right, then what's your second favorite besides the motherland?
Oh, I have not a second necessarily, but I love Italy. I love China. I love Italy and I love Sweden.
Great mix right there.
Oh, and Panama.
And so to that point, what advice would you have for someone who's never traveled abroad?
Oh, just follow your passion because I mean, you should go someplace that really interests you. And the best advice I could give anybody is learn about where you're going before you get there. You know, do some homework so you're not constantly looking in your guidebook and not really experiencing wherever you happen to be. And the second thing I would say, and this has been my most favorite part of travel, is just go off the beaten road. You know, go places. Take the road that you don't know. You don't know where it goes to. I do that in Ireland all the time. It's great fun. You have the wonderful experiences.
One thing I've learned is if you can learn just a couple of phrases in their
Oh yeah,
local language, that goes a
sure.
long way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. People love that. Then they think that you know. I actually represented the government of Egypt many years ago for quite a few years, and um, I had to deal with the president as well as cabinet officers. And I didn't know Arabic, so I started to take Arabic, but I learned enough Arabic so I could have enough of a conversation that they thought I knew a lot more than I did. So then they would switch to English to practice their English. So it worked.
Win, win, win.
Win-win, yes.
I think today's world, certainly in a post 9/11 era, and obviously with the conflicts going on today, fear keeps many people from traveling abroad. How much should fear guide us, and how much should we just use plain old common sense for our own safety?
Oh, it's like another one of those questions where I don't choose fear. I never do, but I don't think you should be unnecessarily, you should be unnecessarily risky in terms of what you do. I mean, the world, don't go to Israel and Gaza today, right? But there are plenty of other parts of the world that you can travel to. I think you just have to be smart and observant and really pay attention to the cultures and the norms in any culture in any country. But I just think too many Americans don't travel, don't experience life outside of the U.S. How are we going to understand, why we should support one part of the world, why we should do whatever we're going to do on the humanitarian side or the military side or whatever? How do you know how to make those good decisions if you've not traveled? And unfortunately, we have too many members of Congress who haven't traveled, who really don't understand. They get their information by these codels after they've been elected. I mean, I think it's something wrong with that system. We should have a better way of teaching everybody in this country multiple foreign languages and get kids traveling at a young age.
Couldn't agree more. That'll be our new platform.
That's it.
So we mentioned in the intro all of your outside business activities. How did you become involved with Vital Voices, and how does it identify and develop emerging women leaders around the world?
Um, Vital Voices was a germ of an idea after Hillary Clinton, who was then First Lady, went to China and gave her speech saying women's rights are human rights and human rights are women's rights, and she really electrified women from around the world with just those words. Um, then people wanted to meet her when she traveled. Women wanted to meet her when she traveled. And the Secretary of State then was Madeleine Albright, and they wanted to meet Madeleine when she traveled. So they set up this little program in the State Department. It was little, they had barely any budget, called Vital Voices. And I actually got involved with it at the time because it wasn't a partisan issue or anything. They brought women from all different um, backgrounds in to help with this because they would bring some women to the U.S. or they had a program in Northern Ireland, for example, that I went to, et cetera. So I got involved in this while it was still a government program. Um, and then when the Clinton administration was over, they decided they were going to set it up as a NGO instead, took it out of the State Department and created a board. And so then I went on the board. So that was a very long time ago. So I've been involved ever since. And for 8 years was the chairman of the board, and now am emeritus chairman.
And is that something that anyone can join? If a woman in the audience wants to get involved, can they join it?
Um, it's not, you don't join Vital Voices. Vital Voices provides technical assistance to women who are emerging leaders around the world. Vital Voices provides grants through the State Department to gender-based violence programs around the world. Vital Voices helps women prepare themselves for leadership positions in civic life. We used to use the word political. We can't use that anymore. We learned very quickly that that was not a word, even though we are involved in that kind of thing. So it's not a membership organization. You don't join, but you can become involved in regional councils around the world, or you can become involved by supporting events that Vital Voices has, et cetera, or by supporting the women. You can just go on the website and see all the incredible women, and each one of them could use support.
You've personally represented leaders of more than a dozen countries on issues ranging from economic crisis to nation building and trade expansion. How do you gain the trust of a country's leader to the point where they choose you to represent their nations at such critical times, especially when they may not even know who you are?
You're not hired unless they know who you are. It really is. It comes through a relationship in every instance. I can't imagine that any leader would hire someone to represent them unless they knew them really well and trusted them. So you get to know them. And actually, the way it started, Egypt was my first client, and the way it started for me was being on the board of a Center for Democracy and working in democracy initiatives around the world and getting to know world leaders. And then as they ran for office or as they were involved in office, they came to me for various reasons to help them. But the relationship was always there first.
Maybe as a follow-up to that, from your perspective, what are the key factors that contribute to building trust with others?
Well, my mantra is always, listen, 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 no matter what. And so I think I'm a really good listener. That's the best advice I can always give people, is to learn to listen first. And I got this advice actually in an interesting way right after I started my business and I had a chance to pitch a very big client. It was 7-Up, and I was pitching against big agencies. And I had a friend who at that time was the #1 salesman for IBM. And he said to me, I told him I was going the next day to make this pitch, and he said, well, just pitch me and let me hear you. So I started off, blah, blah, blah. And he goes like, stop. He said, here's my advice. Listen 80% of the time and talk 20% of the time in that order. He said, you'll get the sale every time. So I did. And I did. We got the business, and I never forgot it.
Well, it's like the old saying, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, and keep it closed and listen.
Right, exactly.
So how should we handle situations where trust has been broken or lost? Can it be rebuilt? And if so, how?
Well, could you be a little more specific about that? Like what kind of a situation? Is it on an interpersonal basis, or?
It could have been personal or professional in terms of maybe they expected something from you and it wasn't delivered.
Mm-hmm. I think rebuilding trust is really hard. You have to kind of do it by being who, the other person needs you to be, whatever that situation is. But I think that it's so important when trust has been broken, if you want to restore trust. And you don't necessarily always want to do that or need to do that. But if you want to, then you need to start talking. There needs to be dialogue. And you need to start at the things that you believe in together, the things that you agree on, and then move on to the things that are a little tougher to do. And forgiveness has to be part of that somewhere along the way.
This is one of my favorite topics to talk about with guests like yourself. As you've worked with leaders in the public and private sectors globally, you've been an ardent proponent of the philosophy of servant leadership. What is servant leadership, and who are some of the leaders you've worked with who exemplify servant leadership?
Such a good question. Servant leadership is so important, and we don't see a whole lot of it. I was thinking about this today because listening is a big important piece of servant leadership. Empathy is one. Stewardship is, making it not about you, but about others. That's really what servant leadership is about. And if you look at our Congress today, we don't have too many servant leaders. I'm kind of hard pressed to think about. Could say a few, but the sad thing is that I can't say it a lot, about it. And actually, we need more corporate leaders, who are servant leaders. Obviously, people who are in the nonprofit world, even a lot of military people are servant leaders, et cetera. But it's a and it's a concept, as you know, if you talk about this a lot. Not everybody's into this. Not everybody thinks that servant leadership is the way things should go. A lot of people think that you should be more dictatorial, and and in many circumstances, maybe you should be. Maybe that's what it is. But overall, if you can put other people first, you're going to accomplish anything you would try to accomplish. You really are. And it might not be right in certain situations. I'm sure that people who are waging war in Israel and Gaza right now definitely aren't thinking about servant leadership. But later on, it's a concept that really needs to be reintroduced.
Again, couldn't agree with you more. So we've talked a lot about the great things you've done professionally. Let's talk about what some of those great things have done for you personally. You're in some very, very rare company, including King Charles III of the United Kingdom and former Pepsi CEO Indra Nooyi, as a recipient of the Global Empowerment Humanitarian Award. How does an honor of that magnitude change the way people view or interact with you, and how do you maintain your perspective?
Well, I don't think too many people know that. They might maybe more know it now that you just mentioned. My friends thought it was cool, and my mom really loved it. An award is an award is an award. It was great. It was a very fun night, but it's just an award, and it actually, I received it for the work that I've done with women leaders and Vital Voices Women and other women around the world, and so that was cool. I was glad that could be recognized. Yeah.
An award is an award is an award. Yeah. Among your other honors, among other awards, you've also been recognized as one of the top 100 Irish Americans, one of the 50 Irish Power Women, one of the 100 Outstanding International Irish Business Leaders, and the Small Business Administration's National Woman Business Owner of the Year and National Woman Business Advocate. Now, this might be like asking a parent to pick their favorite child, but is there one of those honors you're most proud of and what it means to you?
No.
I knew that was the answer.
Not at all. No, all great. Thank you very much. I'm very appreciative, but no, it doesn't define me.
I have to have you back now. It's just fantastic stuff. So, Susan, we always like to close on a positive note, and I'd like you to take us to the close by looking back on all of your travel, your international relationships, and the work you've done, and share with us what you're most proud of and what you hope or know will be your most positive impact, and what we can do as individuals to build upon what you've done to create a better world.
Oh my goodness gracious.
No pressure.
That's a big question. I'm too young to think about what I'm most proud of because I hope that's yet to come. But I'm really proud of the success of women who are, who nobody would know about, but, that I've helped in some way, and they've gone on to do really, important things, so that's just too hard to answer, Chris. I'm proud of surviving. I'm proud of, pushing through when it was really tough to do, because at the time that I was really starting out, women were really having to work hard. But what I'm less proud of is the fact that we have so much farther to go. You just hate to see that. I'm just grateful. I'm really grateful. I've had a wonderful life full of opportunity. I'm really glad that I moved to Washington, D.C. because I got all kinds of opportunities I might not have gotten in other places. And I'm glad that my parents just told me I could do whatever I wanted to do, because I have.
Maybe to paraphrase your immediate response, the best is yet to come.
I hope so.
I'm sure it is. Susan Davis, thank you so much for being with us today. It was a real pleasure and an honor.
Oh, it was really great fun, Chris. I'll talk to you anytime. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
All righty.
And have a good day. Thank you. And thank you to our audience for joining us for another episode of Next Steps Forward. I'm Chris Meek. For more details on upcoming shows and guests, please follow me on Facebook at facebook.com/Chris Meek Public Figure and on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Chris Meek_USA. We'll be back next Tuesday, same time, same place, with our leader from the world of business, politics, public policy, sports, or entertainment. Until then, stay safe and keep taking your next steps forward.